It's a Marvel Monday and we're talking the X-Men universe. So today I'm going to stop and rank all 12 X-Men final battles from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of all 12 X-Men final battles. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list and I would love to see yours. When it came to the ranking, I was looking at three things. The first one, how good is the action? How memorable is it? Second, how strong are the emotional moments? And third, how satisfying of a conclusion is it to the film that you're watching? One final thing before we get started, this video is brought to you by Audible. While in quarantine, you can listen to a free audiobook of your choice at audibletrial.com/Sean Chandler. Sign up for a free 30-day trial and you will get a free audiobook of your choice from their massive selection. I recommend checking out Slugfest. It tells the 50-year history of the feud between Marvel and DC, but there's also a ton of other books you might want to check out over there. You can get a book for free, audibletrial.com/Sean Chandler. Link is down below in the description, and let's get started. Coming in last place is The Wolverine. I put this one in last because I think this is the third act which hurts the movie the most. I was tracking along with this film just fine for the first two acts. He shows up where the final showdown's about to take place. A bunch of ninjas surround him. And in the theatrical cut, they actually cut out about a 3 or 4 minute long fight with ninjas. And then we go into our final battle with the Silver Samurai, and it just feels out of place in the film. I'm not the first person to say this, but it really knocks back the movie because tonally it feels out of place. It doesn't necessarily have the kind of that gritty realism that we've seen throughout most of the movie. It doesn't really lead to a series of twists, turns, and reveals that are particularly satisfying. Whereas some of the movies on this list might have more embarrassing elements in their third act, they at least tried some things, went for it a little bit, and failed in the process. This movie, I just felt like it was a series of bad ideas that just don't pay off and don't fit the movie they were making. Number 11, X-Men Origins Wolverine. This one is a victim of too many plot lines and some really bad ideas. On the positive, Liv Schreiber, he's really good as Sabretooth, so there's always some spark on screen when you have him and Hugh Jackman going back and forth a little bit, especially the moment in the final duel where they actually team up a little bit and he's like, no one's gonna kill you but me. Hits a couple of solid notes in there. The idea of Logan, Wolverine coming in to save these child mutants from the people that did the experiments on him works well enough as a plot idea, but pretty much everything else doesn't really pay off. The main twist about the love interest just felt like they were trying a little bit too hard to have a clever twist in the finale. And then, of course, there is the treatment of Deadpool. This is truly one of the most insane decisions ever made for a big, gigantic blockbuster. They cast the perfect actor to play the merc with the mouth, and then going into the third act when he really becomes Deadpool, they sew his mouth shut, ignore all of his actual powers, and give him a series of new ones. Feels a little bit like some executive played Mortal Kombat way too much and wanted to give this version of Deadpool all the powers of his favorite characters from Mortal Kombat, but it's just embarrassing to watch a movie so misfire when it comes to handling a character. But you know, even the stuff where Professor X shows up, nice little Easter egg, but the attempt to de-age Patrick Stewart has not aged well at all, and it looked pretty weird back in the day too. So overall, at least they tried to do some stuff, and the movie wasn't very good overall, but mostly a big dud. Bringing us into the top 10 is X-Men Apocalypse. Disappointing is the word that comes to mind when I think of this final battle. While it is a massive sequence, there are global stakes. There's all kinds of moments in it that are character development, payoff for things that have been set up, and then even character relationship dynamic moments happen inside of it. All of them feel like they fall a little bit flat. None of it is as impactful and emotional as it should be in light of how much stuff is going on. Is it like a couple of examples? They just had Magneto and Storm teaming up with Apocalypse to have an actual apocalypse, and then they switch sides in the middle of it, and we're just supposed to kind of forgive them. Magneto in particular is responsible for who knows how many deaths with the stuff that he's been doing, but then we're just supposed to shrug it off like it doesn't fully calculate in the weight of what he just did. And so much of the stuff that happens just kind of feels like they didn't fully think through what they were doing. The prime example of this is the final showdown with Apocalypse. This is one of the X-Men's best villains, and it should be this massive, cool showdown. And we get like 30 seconds where Charles Xavier and Apocalypse have this mental duel in the mines that does this dream-like thing. It was pretty cool for 30 seconds. And then you just basically have Apocalypse standing on a set while everybody's just shooting at him. And it's just not as big and exciting as it should be. So this one just falls flat for me. Number 9, X-Men 3, The Last Stand. This final battle is a whole lot like the movie as a whole. It's huge in scale and it has way too much going on, and thus it has to rush through all of it. Like on the one hand, it's a massive sequence involving the Golden Gate Bridge, armies, tons of mutants, lots of stakes for specific mutants as well as the world as a whole, and then Phoenix showing up. But because of that, there's just too much going on, and it feels like it's jumping between all of it in a way that doesn't feel particularly smooth. Like as an example, the part where they get to the island and they move the bridge and everything, it's like broad daylight. And then it feels very suddenly like it cuts to nighttime. And just watching through it, I'm not sure if there's an explanation, but like it felt like, wait, where did the sun go out of nowhere? And then the big gigantic battle happens, and as large in size as it is, it feels at the same time like they're on a set that's a big set, but small, like they're not on an actual island. There's plot points that just kind of feel thrown in there, like when the Dr. Scientist gets thrown off the building and then Angel shows up out of nowhere after 45 minutes of not being on screen. He just shows up to save his dad, like it's paying off this moment, but they haven't invested anything into that relationship. Likewise, you're going through the sequence, Magneto gets defeated, it feels like things are winding down. Then Phoenix shows up and decides to start just tearing things up. And so it just felt like they had too many things. They didn't know how to balance it and tie it together smoothly so you had a nice flow for the narrative. So just everything is kind of thrown in there together. And that's a lot what this movie feels like. Next up is Deadpool 2. And much like I felt about the movie, it was a good final battle, but a lot of elements fell flat and not fully fleshed out as well as they could have been. On the one hand, it was a lot of fun to see Deadpool team up with Cable to mow down a bunch of pedophiles and these guys that are just abusing mutants. Very satisfying to see all of that. Also a ton of fun to see Juggernaut and Colossus go at it, except with some of the funny, kind of goofy, rated R humor that you'd expect from a Deadpool movie. So when it came to just kind of the showdown moments, some of the action, totally on board with what they were going for here. But as they tried to like tie all the plot points and themes together in the finale, especially as they're trying to resolve the Russell plot line and Deadpool making a sacrifice, and they do this very extended death sequence for Deadpool, it never fully rings true to me. It felt too much like they were trying really hard to find a way to like have it pay off and satisfy, and they didn't quite get there. And then they had this idea for a joke of like, what if we did his Oscar over the top performance? And that's the joke. It goes on way too long. I think that time travel mechanics and the logic of exactly how this works out doesn't fully make sense. And when you have a time travel movie, you have to have enough consistency in how the elements work and how exactly Cable goes back in time, or else you just kind of lose all credibility with your film, and they don't hold up all that well for me. And so it's one that entertains me. There's things I really like, but it also left me on that note of like, I don't think you fully landed the ship on this one. Number 7, X-Men. The original final battle in this franchise is still pretty good. Certainly doesn't have the scope and size and complexity of some of the other third acts, but there's plenty of nice little moments in this one. Couple things I really enjoyed. There's a nice battle where Mystique appears as Wolverine, so you get two Hugh Jackmans duking it out. There's a nice little moment where she tries to use her claws against his claws and they get cut off. Likewise, Toad is played by Ray Park, who played Darth Maul, so he's an incredible athletic gymnast, and so was able to do a bunch of really cool things as he was kind of battling these people. Likewise, Joss Whedon did a touch-up on the script for this movie, so there's some real nice little, very Joss Whedon lines in the third act of this film that kind of adds some nice levity in the moments where it pauses. There's also some bad lines that he wrote, like about Toad's getting struck by lightning. Some of the things don't fully land for me, like the saber-tooth battle on the top of the Statue of Liberty. Looks a little bit goofy, probably not the best idea. Probably some of my favorite moments is the final little section in it where Rogue is dying and Wolverine decides to like fully embrace his heroic side and potentially sacrifice himself by touching her to give her his healing ability. I think the emotional satisfaction of that kind of is the best element for me, but all in all, a pretty good start to this franchise. Then we have Dark Phoenix. While I'm not the biggest fan of this movie, probably the best sequence in this film is the final battle of it, which is interesting because the entire train sequence was reshoots. They had a totally different third act for this film that apparently was some sort of mix of stuff that was in Captain Marvel as well as stuff that was in Captain America Civil War, and they just went, this is too similar to stuff over in the MCU, and so they came up with the idea of this train sequence, and it's a very cool action sequence. All of the characters get great little moments. Storm just toasts a bunch of aliens on the outside of the train. Nightcrawler grabs a guy, drops him in front of the train. And of course, Magneto in a metal train, battling this big, gigantic army of guys that he can just tear up by throwing doors at them, squishing an entire train car, lifting up a bunch of machine guns to shoot at Jessica Chastain. So many awesome, amazing moments that if the movie before it had been better, and if you cared about the villains a little bit more, this one might have hopped up into my top 3 because it's just a really great action sequence. At number 5 is Deadpool. Now, this certainly isn't the biggest of the third acts. It's not the one with the most satisfying conclusion, but it probably does put the biggest grin on your face and is the most fun. It kicks off with this great gag where they show up and Deadpool has forgotten his bag of guns. Apparently, that was like a rewrite in the script because their budget wasn't big enough to have him do a huge shootout with a bunch of guns, and therefore that's why they wrote that gag into it. And then it just leads into more of what you've enjoyed from all of the rest of the film. The jokes continue to land. There's still a bunch of great fight sequence action moments where everybody kind of gets in on the action. And, you know, he gets to kind of save the day, but, you know, Vanessa, it's not like she's super happy with him at this particular time. And so it keeps all the right tension and elements. It doesn't break the tone. The jokes don't go on the back burner. And so it just continues with everything that you've enjoyed about the film up to that point in time, especially picking on Francis for his silly name. But at the same time, some of the ones I don't think were quite as satisfying as they probably should have been. They went for a joke with how they kind of finish off Francis instead of like really giving you a satisfying final moment with him. And the joke lands, but I kind of wish with how evil the guy is, how much you hate him, I kind of wanted a little bit something better with the way that he gets taken out, but still some great action, plenty of laughs, and a very solid conclusion to the film. Next up is X-Men First Class. This one was a little bit tricky for me to rank because I think it has some of the best character moments and satisfying conclusions to specific character arcs and story arcs, but the action itself wasn't particularly memorable or iconic. Like, certainly you get some mutants battling each other, you get them using their powers with the missiles and everything, and Banshee flying over the water, but there's not a ton of iconic action shots besides Magneto stopping the missiles. But what it does so well is finishing off some of these specific plot lines, in particular where Magneto has his showdown with Shaw and everything freezes and Magneto pulls out the coin and he's like, I agree with everything you just said, and then just sends the coin through his head. Such a great, satisfying moment. Maybe the most satisfying revenge kill in the entire X-Men franchise. Add to that, you have that moment where Magneto is truly born, and you see that division between Eric and Charles. They are both mutants, but they have very different worldviews, and that plays out in this finale. And of course, you see the incident where Charles finally gets shot and loses the ability to walk, and it's an accident. And you have a moment where, as Eric realizes it happens, he abandons everything else because his friend got injured. All those character moments absolutely work for me. I just wish that there was more just really strong mutant action in the final battle. Real quick before I give you my top 3, remember to share your ranking down below. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Also, if you've enjoyed this video, check out this playlist right up here with my other top X-Men videos. I've got my ranking of the movies, I've got a fan cast of who I think should play the characters in the MCU, and I plan to put on villains and heroes in there pretty soon as well. If you've enjoyed this video, there's definitely something up there that you will enjoy. In third place is X-Men Days of Future Past. Now this one is massive on scale on 2 different fronts, as you have the 1973 plot line where Magneto is going after the president, and then you have the future kind of destruction world where they are about to be defeated by these Sentinels that are coming hard after them. So you have an army of mutants over here, army of mutants over here, and plenty of great character moments, as well as awesome mutant action battling big gigantic robots. In the past, some of the strong stuff is Mystique as she processes through what does she really believe in, which side is she on, and then of course in the broken future, you have Charles Xavier and Magneto working together, and you have this moment where Magneto is about to die and he's realizing, like, why did we waste so much time fighting when we should have been working together? That's the stuff in here that I think is the most powerful, that they had a story where you could have some very cool moments between characters that you couldn't normally do in a film, as well as a ton of different mutants battling a ton of different Sentinels in a bunch of different contexts in a bunch of different ways. So easily a top 3 finisher. Our runner-up is X2 X-Men United. There's a whole lot in here to love. It takes all the stuff that worked about the first X-Men movie and just takes it to the next level with this big, gigantic, epic final action sequence in the film. You've got Wolverine battling with Lady Deathstrike in this very cool showdown of 2 mutants, but also has cool martial arts choreography inside of it. You have all of our mutants getting some moment where they get to shine inside of it. Magneto walks into a room and just pulls the pins out of all of the grenades on a bunch of soldiers and blows them up to pieces. As Wolverine is exploring this facility, you kind of dive into his past. I think the piece for me where just kind of pulls this one all together is that very much the end of this film is an homage to the end of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, where they have Jean Grey, and Bryan Singer openly stated that he was going for that, where she has to sacrifice herself. Both the music cues, the shot choice, the voiceover, so much of it is paying tribute to this movie that I absolutely love from many years past, and it works so well in this context as kind of having this final battle where there are consequences. For our heroes to win this victory and save the day, they have to take losses. And so you feel the weight of everything that just took place, and it doesn't feel cheap. So I absolutely love this one. But coming in first place is Logan. This is a perfect example of how when you establish characters that you care about and villains that you really hate, you don't have to have world-ending or city-ending stakes in order to have a thrilling, exciting, emotional finale. So what do we get in this finale? It kicks off with Wolverine going into full berserker mode, just tearing guys up, running through the forest with his bone claws. And part of the reason this works so well is they've established just how awful these guys are that are just rounding up these mutant kids. They don't care about them. Therefore, we want to see them pay. They made villains that we hate, and they set up a series of moments throughout the finale where all the different characters get in on the action. Of course, X23 2023, Laura jumping in there as this little kid throwing guys down, ripping them to shreds. Of course, very cool and awesome to see. The fact that the Boyd Halbrook character gets taken out by all of the kids and kind of this kind of slow death as he realizes, uh-oh, they're using their powers against me. Such a satisfying death for that particular character. And then, of course, two Hugh Jackmans duking it out in this very brutal fight that ends, of course, with our farewell to Logan. It has stakes, emotion. You care about the characters. So for me, this one comes in at number 1. Remember, if you want more videos like this, check out that playlist right over there where I've got the X-Men movies ranked, my MCU fan cast. Or if you want a free audiobook, check out that link down below in the description to get a free audiobook from Audible. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.